Hi there, my name's Alison St. Germain, and I'm the registered dietitian for Iowa State University Student Health and Wellness, and I specialize in eating disorders and body and food relationships. This is the first informational video in a series that I'm going to be doing on different diseases, and this video will kind of set the stage for what we're going to be focusing on next. All of this information in this video and the other ones coming forward are all focused on health and not weight. Even if weight loss might play a role, I would like you to consider shifting the focus to health-promoting behaviors, because the health-promoting behaviors are what can lead to sustainable health outcomes without the harmful stigma and messaging. So let's get started. And so what we're going to discuss specifically today is why the weight loss recommendations are not helpful and can actually be harmful. And a lot of it stems from when the student or client hears weight loss, they go to the internet and TikTok where they get a lot of misinformation. And even if they're told to lose weight in a healthy way, that also poses problems and restrictions. So just weight loss recommendations in general are not helpful and usually harmful. And so we're going to discuss a bit about the harm that it can cause and what weight loss diet, some of the harm that can do as well. And then what I specialize in is nutrition. And so we're going to focus on the nutrition piece of it, but other health promoting behaviors as well. And then I will have for you a handout that you can give students, and also for your own information and other resources too, that if you want to read some research around weight-inclusive care or whatever topic that we are discussing, you're free to do that as well. Okay, so the problem with telling a student to lose weight or giving them some type of a referral to a weight loss program is it can cause bias and discrimination and stigma, which lead to a whole host of other health issues. And, these recommendations are, made out of, wanting to help the student. And so the stigma and the bias, this is implicit. And so that's important to notice, though, because our vision can get clouded sometimes by the person's weight. And so other things that can happen, too, is poor health outcomes. So, for example, anything that you want to improve with the person, whether it be their cholesterol levels or their body image or whatever it is, if you recommend weight loss, usually the opposite happens, and their actual health outcomes that you wanted to improve actually make it worse than if we would use a weight-inclusive approach. So it also hinders communication with the patient if there is weight stigma, and they are less likely to seek medical care after that as well. And so then what happens over time is there's inequitable and non-accessible health care for a big bulk of people because of the weight stigma. And also, the results are so not sustainable, and I do have resources for you to show this as well. And 95% of folks cannot keep the weight off long term, and so only a 5% is a success rate. And success in this case, if we're talking about weight loss being the success, would be 5% can keep the weight off. But the research doesn't show how people are doing this. Do they have an eating disorder? Are they obsessed with this? Is this like their, focus of their life? So we don't have information on that, but we can suspect that some of those 5% of the people are having issues that way as well. And also, 5% success rate in general is not very good, especially when there's a lot of harm that can be done with recommending weight loss, even if the weight loss would be helpful. Okay. So dieting and or weight loss is also a very strong predictor for disordered eating, food obsession and cravings, and there's this strong pull to food. You might hear people talk about this a lot, where They may have not eaten much during the day. They're following their diet. They're sticking to it. And they get to the end of the day and they can't stop eating. Well, that's biology, because what's happening is that they've been restricting and restricting too heavily, or their mindset is the good food, bad food mindset. And so they just keep thinking about this food that they aren't supposed to eat. And there's just a very, very strong pull to that. I do a lot with students talking about good food, bad food, hunger and fullness, and I work through these different things with them, and that's all part of the food and body relationship. And then also there can be malnutrition, and oftentimes it's muscle loss, because going on a restrictive diet, there is going to be muscle loss, and if their body is in a lot of stress, under a lot of stress, the muscle loss is going to be very quick. And so oftentimes what happens, people can maintain a weight loss for up to 2 years, but getting into the 5-year range is when people just start gaining the weight back and then actually gain more than what was lost oftentimes. And then we have to worry about, too, is the weight cycling. So people who are losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight, then put themselves at increased risk for physical and mental health outcomes, poor outcomes, which now what's happening is the weight on their body is what is being blamed for this. But what's happening is they're losing weight because that's the recommendations they've gotten. And so they gain it back and then keep losing, gaining, and it puts them in worse health than if they would have maintained that weight and focused on just health promoting behaviors and not lose any weight at all. They would be in a healthier state. So the next thing I want to talk about is that weight loss is not a behavior. It actually is a symptom of a much more complex issue, right? And so in healthcare, we always, we do focus on symptoms. We want to treat the symptoms in order to make the, student feel better. But what happens if we just look at the symptoms, we're never going to get to the actual problem, what is going on. And so I'm going to tell you a little story. It sounds like a dark humor joke, but it's actually a story that was told to me by another dietitian to actually illustrate the point of symptom-based treatment. I teach this to dietetic interns too, and it kind of sticks with them. So let's say I had 3 people come into my office and all 3 of them were coughing, and I gave them all the same treatment. I gave them a cough drop. And so the first one got better, the second one did not get better, and the third one died. Well, how come? They all were coughing, so I gave them each the same treatment. Well, the cause of the coughing was different. The first person just had a minor throat irritation, so the cough drop took care of it. The second person had tuberculosis, so the cough drop did nothing for them. And the third person was already choking on a cough drop, so the cough drop, didn't help, and they actually died. So I didn't make that up. That actually was told to me. I feel like I should change the end of the story, but I think it really does illustrate the point that symptoms might be similar among people, but because the cause is different, we can't treat everybody the same. And so, of course, I know there's barriers around that because we have lots of barriers in healthcare, not having enough time and that sort of thing. But at Iowa State, what you could do is say, hey, I'm going to refer you to Alison to help out with this part of it. So that can actually save you some time too. So bottom line with this is that, if nobody is checking to see, going upstream from the river and trying to figure out why everyone's jumping into this river and gaining weight, I mean, we're just constantly going to be treating the symptom and we're not going to get to the root of the problem. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is health promoting behaviors. And this is going to be for all the different videos, and I'm going to tweak it according to the disease because it's a little bit different. And so this is health focused, not weight focused, and these will produce sustainable changes regardless of if someone's weight changes or not. And so the part that I'm going to spend the most time on is the nutrition piece of it. And so and I'm going to show you kind of the template that I will use for each of the disease states. But in a nutshell, it is about consistent eating patterns, not skipping meals, not going so long between eating so they don't get that ravenous, can't stop eating type feeling. And then also really work on flexible and varied nutrition, something that has some structure but flexible for their life. And the nutrition piece differs depending on the disease, and we'll talk about that in next videos. But then with every person, I like to look holistically at other things because we tend to hyper focus on the nutrition and on the exercise because those are two things we can control better. But there are lots of reasons that play into somebody's weight that we don't talk about enough. One of them will be the social determinants of health. And then also looking at these other factors here would be physical activity or movement. I like to say movement instead of exercise because somebody who doesn't like to go to the gym, if we tell them, you have to go to the gym and do this, it's just not something that they might even be able to do. So if we can focus on just increasing daily movement, that's going to help. And then also high quality sleep and stress are huge. They affect how somebody feels hunger and fullness. Plus, lack of sleep puts a lot of stress on somebody, which also affects somebody's weight and their physical health outcomes as well. And so I work a lot with students on hunger and fullness and what it means to have a hunger interrupter because we have lots of those when we're busy, especially I see with grad students, they are even busier and just don't even notice when they're getting hungry. And then also it affects your mood, increases other mental health issues like anxiety and also depression. And then also doing some harm reduction around decreasing alcohol or abstaining even tobacco or other substances as well, because that affects our health and weight as well too. And this is the other thing that just kind of annoys me that I want to share with you is that when somebody loses weight and they're doing all these health promoting behaviors, the weight loss gets all the glory. And it's not the weight loss, it's technically the health promoting behaviors that should get the glory. So I want you to help me praise the health promoting behaviors instead of the weight loss, because oftentimes the weight loss is what is readily seen and that's what gets all of the glory. Because somebody can do health promoting behaviors, not have a change in weight, and still improve their cholesterol levels, their glucose levels, and blood pressure, all of that. And so in the series that we'll be doing with these videos, I will be talking about the nutrition piece specifically with each one. Oh, look at that. I jumped a slide here, but that's okay. So I already said this, and so this is just a review on the slide. People of all sizes and no weight loss and doing the health promoting behaviors that we just discussed will see improvement in their health markers like blood pressure, glucose, lipids, mental health, and liver enzymes, just for example. So the next piece here is the nutrition part. And gentle nutrition, that verbiage comes from intuitive eating, which is one of the frameworks that I use to guide education with others and my counseling. And intuitive eating is much more than hunger fullness. It's actually by the authors Triboli and Reish. And it was first published, I think, 2000, but we're on the 4th edition now. And it has 10 principles. And the 10th principle is gentle nutrition. And so that's where that verbiage comes from. And so I like to focus on nutrition by addition. And that is for a couple reasons. If we're helping people add to what they're already eating, let's say helping them find more fiber or, helping them find more plant-based proteins or whatever it is. And if they're adding that, they're naturally going to decrease some of the other things that they're eating. So maybe it's saturated fat if they have high cholesterol, for example. If we're helping them find more plant-based proteins, that's going to just help decrease some of those other ones. And the second reason why I like to promote the nutrition by addition is because it's a mental piece too. If we say, you cannot eat this or you should really avoid this, our brains then just want to eat it that much more. And so just kind of making all food, yeah, you can eat that. You can't be too strict, because if you are, then when you get that food, it takes more of that food to satisfy you. So having some flexibility like that is important, but also people do need some structure as well. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit too. So it's kind of a fine balance between being flexible and not too rigid. So the number one thing I talk about with most people when I talk about nutrition is consistent eating patterns. Does that mean they need to eat breakfast the same time every day, lunch the same time? No. But I say things like try to eat breakfast within 1 hour of getting up. because oftentimes people will say, well, I'm just not hungry for breakfast. Well, that's because they're not used to eating it usually. And so then the body just adapts and you don't feel hungry anymore. And so I give them an experiment. I say, I want you to try eating breakfast, 4 of the 7 days of this week. And then they'll tell me oftentimes is, well, now I get hungry for lunch. And then I explain, well, that's a good thing that you're getting hungry for lunch. That means that your metabolism is working and you should be getting hungry for lunch. So it's a lot of like retraining some old diety things that people have, have taught them throughout the years. And the flexible piece too is about, our day-to-day is different. And so we have to be flexible because nothing is ever going to be exactly the same. So being able to have that without having that all or none, because I see a lot of all or none people out there where they can follow a diet for a long time and there's one little small deviation and it all goes down the tube. So that's what we're trying to prevent as well. And then the next piece I'll talk about, too, is the nutrition specific to the disease. Like if I'm talking about diabetes, we'll talk about consistent carbohydrates. And we have to be more in tune with nutrition when there's a chronic disease that is involved. And the flexible rule of threes is something that I use a lot. And in fact, my intern is making a handout for this, so it'll be available to you as well. And basically what it is it's a way to remember, okay, let's eat at least 3 meals a day, and then snacks, 2 to 3. It depends on the person. Some people like to eat 3 big meals and they're not hungry in between. Some people like 3 smaller meals, so then they're hungry in between. Snacks can be take a very important place in what somebody's eating. And so we talk through that. And so 3 meals a day, 2 to 3 snacks a day. And then with each meal, try to have at least 3 of the food groups represented. And so I say you need carbohydrates because that's our biggest energy source. And there is a lot of education around that because of social media saying carbohydrates are bad and will make you fat. So we do talk through that. And then I say pick a protein source, and then we kind of try to figure out what that would be. And then I say pick one other thing, and then try to vary it up. If you have, let's say they chose to have like a salad for lunch. Well, then for dinner, maybe they'll have some berries or something like that. So they can have more than 3 of the food groups. And so people also get confused between food groups and macronutrients. So I explain that too. So the reason for this is just to help remind people. And then the last thing is check in with your hunger and fullness at least every 3 hours. Because of the chaos going around us, it's really difficult to remember to eat sometimes or even hear those hunger cues. So those are the flexible rule of threes. And then what I talk with, this is all part of gentle nutrition, is to think of this more holistically. I see a lot of people, they get so tuned into the nutrient piece that they can't see anything else. So if somebody is pain the majority of their time, this is what I eat because of the health reasons, that's actually too rigid. And it doesn't allow for, social occasions, fun foods that don't fit into their narrow range of what's healthy. And then taste is the next one. The food has to taste good or people won't come back to it. But just like we can't spend all of our attention on nutrients, if someone just based their food choices off of taste, that's not going to be holistic either, and that's too rigid. And so those 2 things, trying to find a balance between the 2. And then it is the interoceptive awareness, which is what's going on in your body. Hunger, fullness, we pay attention to. Food tastes better if we're not ravenous or if we're not too full. Food satisfaction plays into that. And any food, like if somebody has celiac disease, if they had something with wheat or barley or rye in it, they would not feel very good. So that interoceptive awareness helps shift what they're going to choose. And that's the same thing like if someone's lactose intolerant or anything like that can just help shift the focus of what they're going to choose. And then I also talk about access. Access to food can mean what can I afford? How much money do I have in the budget? And then if the student doesn't have enough money or if the budget is tight, I will tell them about SHOP, the food pantry on campus, but I'll also help them find other resources as well so they can buy the food that is going to nourish their body and foods that they like to eat. But it also can be as simple as, what do I have in my apartment right now? And then making the choice based off of all of these nutrients, taste, interoceptive awareness, and access, and make a choice and go with it. And so when they're learning this skill, sometimes can be so hard and they have to really think about it. But as time goes on, it becomes way more automatic and it just kind of happens very quickly. So I have a bunch of resources here for you. And this first link here will take you to hundreds of studies broken down by intuitive eating and interoceptive awareness and food restrictions, binge eating, all those types of things. And so you can read, what's of interest to you. And then I have this here linked up for you, What's Wrong with the War on Obesity. So it's one of the hallmark studies that really is taking a look at, we've been focusing on weight loss for decades and it's not working. So what should we be focusing on and why is this causing harm? And then the last one here is a Google Drive that has all your medical nutrition therapy according to the disease. So if you want to give a handout on diabetes, you click here, get the diabetes one. Or if it's on polycystic ovarian disease, there's a whole bunch in there. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's pretty good for our population because they don't have a lot of these chronic illnesses. And so in the next video, we are going to be looking at a specific disease and go through the medical nutrition therapy of it and the other health promoting behaviors. And I'll have handouts for you as well.